This is the country needs assessment segment of the portfolio impact analysis tool. The assessment of country needs is the second step of the first phase of the tool methodology. As we saw in the previous segments, this first phase is about identifying the most significant impact areas. As part of this process, having understood the main business lines of your bank, which countries you're operating in, which clients and segments you are servicing, we wish to dig a little bit deeper into the context. Having identified the countries in which you're operating, now wish to understand what are the needs in those countries, so that ultimately you can understand which impact areas are most significant by virtue also of the needs of the countries in which you operate, so that your posterior strategy setting and target setting can align with the reality on the ground and the needs of populations on the ground. This worksheet contains two things. It contains the country needs assessment framework, starting line 3, which provides you the wherewithal to have a high-level understanding of what the country needs are for the different impact areas that underpin the SDGs. And then you have a second segment starting line 20, where you will see the country scores. The country scores are basically a score from 1 to 4, from 1 being a low level of need and 4 being a very high level of need, that will be applied to each of the countries that are applicable to you and for each of the impact areas under consideration in this tool. Let us turn to the framework first. This framework is simply a collection of international resources, basically statistical data sets produced mostly by international organizations, which track the status of different countries vis-a-vis different topics. We have sought to identify a number of such resources for each of the impact areas that are considered under this tool. Those impact areas are taken from the UNEP Impact Radar, and the UNEP Impact Radar is directly related to the SDGs. The slight differences that you will see with the SDGs, in that we have 22 impact areas vis-a-vis the 17 SDGs, is simply a matter of being able to track a number of topics that will be meaningful to the private sector and that will be a little bit more bespoke than the 17 SDGs, where certain topics are grouped together, as is the case, for instance, in sustainable cities, and without yet getting to the detail of the 100+ indicators. You can see these impact areas running horizontally, and the resources are listed underneath. As you can see, for each of the impact areas, different aspects of the impact areas are considered. So, for instance, for food, 3 things are considered: undernourishment, healthy nutrition, and food security. Each has a separate resource by which we are trying to understand or to track what the level of country need is. Following this in the framework, you can see the details of the indicator or composite indicators that are being tracked by this particular resource. You can then see for the scoring range of 1 to 4 that was mentioned earlier on, which is the range that would be applicable inside the data set. This is done across the 22 impact areas, and as you will see, the number of specific topics or indicators that are tracked per impact area will vary. Sometimes there may be just one, other times there may be more than one. What is requested by the methodology is to identify within these resources what the status of your countries of operation is as per the scoring range that is being specified here. Now, this remains a high-level overview of country needs, and therefore the framework also includes some advice on how to go further. So you will see for many of the impact areas some avenues for going further to understand some of these topics more specifically for certain communities, for low-income populations or for minorities, or to understand it from a gender perspective. So these are additional items that can be considered by the user of the tool, where there might be a specific topic or a specific angle on an impact area that is relevant to your country. In this tool, as said, you have a space below where the scorings can then be captured. Each country shows twice, one for default values and one for my values. This is because, as you will see lower down, based on the work of current users of the tool, a number of mappings have already been included. Mappings of the country needs based on the resources that are inside the framework, but also additional resources on a number of occasions. So here you can see for Australia, which is one of the countries that was selected in the cartography and therefore shows in orange here. These are the default values that are included in the tool based on the work of the working groups that have been collaboratively working on the implementation of the methodology. And for the purpose of this demo, we have maintained the default values throughout. However, this does say my values. This is because users may wish to add additional research to this process and are encouraged to do so. Country Needs Framework is an opportunity to engage with stakeholders from different technical areas of expertise. This may be governments, it might be civil society bodies, it might be academia, and this will be, as said, to provide additional granularity with respect to the resources that are contained inside the default framework. For those countries that have already been mapped, as said, additional resources have already been taken into consideration on a number of occasions. So that you can see where this is the case, there is a line in the framework here, line 17, that gives the name of the country and the link to the resource that was considered in addition to the resource that's here inside the framework. Should you add any further resources, if you scroll to the right, you will see the table is reproduced in an empty format so that your further resources can be captured here. All additional resources should be documented here and shared with UNEP so that we can continue to update this framework and to include an increasing number of countries in the mapping. One last point is that for those cases where several indicators are tracked for an impact area, you will necessarily come with several values and several rankings. However, under the scoring, you will notice that there is a single cell per impact area. Where you have more than one indicator and therefore more than one score, the highest score should be taken. Highest in the sense of highest level of need. The reason for this is that this scoring table is made for the purpose of identification of impact needs and to help you to identify those pockets of need as a way of better setting your targets and of aligning them with where those needs lie. Were we to average out the different values, it would be more difficult to see where those pockets of need are. And therefore, we always go with the highest value. And this is what has been applied in a number of cases. Also, note that while these resources have been picked on the basis of their credibility, their scope in addressing a large number of countries, and in their availability over time, some resources will have gaps in terms of the countries covered. In those cases, it is, of course, necessary to find alternative resources, and once more, you may wish to turn to government sources that are local or CSO bodies, likewise, that are local, or academic organizations. It is also possible to track needs at a subnational level. So this means at a geographic scope that is smaller than a country. To do this, you would first need to add to the drop-down list inside the cartography where you select the countries from. The explanations of how to do this are provided here inside the tool. You can find this information here where there is an explanation on how to add the resources that are not already here. And this would be the case, obviously, if you're trying to map at a subnational level, since the default level of the tool is indeed by country. We currently have just over 50 countries that are mapped.